The movie opens with a quiet, fog-covered street at night. The only sound is the soft tapping of raindrops against the cobblestones. It's almost too peaceful, and right from the start, you know something is off. The camera pans slowly over a row of old houses, each window dark except for one flickering light. We zoom in on that window to see a young woman sitting inside, frantically writing a letter. Her hands are trembling, and there's a look of sheer terror in her eyes. The light flickers more intensely now, creating an unsettling rhythm. She pauses, staring at the candle, almost like she can feel something watching her from the shadows. As her pen drops, we hear the sound of a door creaking open behind her. Her breath catches, and the scene cuts to black. We're introduced to our protagonist, Jake, played by Ryan Smith, an ordinary guy who works as a photographer for a local newspaper. He's a bit jaded, burnt out by the daily grind, and feels like life has become monotonous. He's looking for something more, something exciting. And that's when he gets an assignment that changes everything. Jake is asked to photograph an old mansion on the outskirts of town, a place rumored to be haunted. Of course, he doesn't believe in ghosts and thinks it's all nonsense. But hey, it's work, right? He heads out with his camera, not knowing that he's about to get way more than he bargained for. The mansion is classic haunted house material. It's huge, old, and surrounded by an overgrown garden that seems like it hasn't been touched in years. The gate is rusted, squeaking as Jake pushes it open. The house looms in the background, covered in ivy, with broken windows that seem like eyes watching him approach. As he steps inside, the floorboards creak under his weight. Dust swirls in the air, caught in the light that streams through the broken windows. It's eerily silent, and the atmosphere feels heavy, like the house itself is breathing. Jake begins to take pictures, but strange things start happening almost immediately. His camera flickers, and the pictures come out blurred, with shadowy figures that weren't there when he snapped the shot. There are soft whispers that seem to follow him, but whenever he turns around, no one is there. He dismisses it as his mind playing tricks on him, until he sees her. At the end of a long hallway, standing perfectly still, is a woman in a white dress. Her face is obscured by her long black hair, and her feet don't seem to be touching the ground. Jake calls out to her, but she doesn't respond. Instead, she glides towards him without moving her legs. Panicked, Jake drops his camera and bolts for the door, but when he gets there, it slams shut on its own. Trapped inside, Jake tries to rationalize what just happened. But the more he explores the house, the more terrifying things get. The whispers grow louder, objects move on their own, and the temperature drops dramatically. He finds old photographs scattered around the house, and in every single one, there's the same woman in white, standing in the background. The tension builds as Jake starts seeing her more frequently, always in the corner of his eye or in the reflection of mirrors. She never speaks, never screams, but her presence is enough to drive Jake to the edge. He knows he needs to get out, but every time he tries, something stops him. He backstory. In the middle of the chaos, Jake finds an old journal hidden behind a loose brick in one of the rooms. As he flips through it, we're taken back in time through flashbacks. The journal belonged to a woman named Emily, who lived in the mansion in the 1800s. Emily had fallen in love with a man named Charles, but their love story took a dark turn when Charles mysteriously disappeared. Consumed by grief, Emily became obsessed with the idea that Charles had been taken by something in the house, a malevolent spirit that preyed on the weak. She tried to summon him back, performing strange rituals that only made the spirit stronger. Eventually, Emily herself vanished, leaving behind nothing but rumors and ghost stories. Jake realizes that the woman in white is Emily's ghost, trapped in the house, looking for Charles. But she's not the only spirit in the house. Something far more sinister is lurking in the shadows, controlling her. The real antagonist of the film is this dark entity, a formless shadow that has been feeding on the souls of those who enter the mansion. It's ancient, older than the house itself, and it thrives on fear and despair. The more Jake tries to escape, the more the entity tightens its grip on him, playing with his mind, showing him visions of his worst fears. At one point, Jake is thrown into a nightmarish sequence where reality and illusion blur. He sees Charles, or what's left of him, a decayed, skeletal figure, trapped in a twisted version of the house's attic. The entity had consumed him long ago, and now it wants Jake as its next victim. The final act of the movie is intense. Jake is no longer trying to just escape, he's trying to survive. He's figured out that the only way to defeat the entity is to destroy the source of its power, an ancient artifact hidden deep within the mansion's basement. Armed with nothing but his camera and a flickering flashlight, Jake ventures into the basement, where the walls seem to close in on him. The basement is a labyrinth of tunnels, and the further Jake goes, the stronger the entity's presence becomes. He hears Emily's voice, pleading with him to help her. But it's hard to tell if she's an ally or just another tool of the entity. The tension is unbearable as Jake finally reaches the artifact, a grotesque, pulsating object that seems to be alive.